The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex.
The 1920s were one of the greatest eras of change for women, the right to vote being one of the most prominent accomplishments.
The 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, giving women the right to vote and setting change in motion throughout the decade. Women's roles changed politically, socially, and economically.
April 6, 1917, and the United States took up arms to join the Allies.
In the time of World War I, men were sent off to fight overseas. Not only did they leave their families and a life of safety, but also they left their jobs. Who would take over?
Women. Women entered these job roles that men once occupied, giving them their first chance in the workplace. They began to live for themselves, as opposed to relying on men.
However, this was not forever. When the men came back from the war and took back their rightful place in the area of employment, women dreaded their inferior status would return. It was unspoken but agreed that childcare and housework remained as a woman's job. Despite this, marriage became an equal partnership to most middle-class families.
The men were no longer in charge.
Because women were given more flexibility in their lifestyle, men also began to share public settings with women, such as bars and parties. In public, a change was brewing in the women's style.
The Victorian style for women, ankle-length dresses, corsets, and tight hairdos were replaced with short skirts, pumps, jewelry, and jet black hair pinned into bobs. Women were breaking conformity. They were starting over.
Women were beginning to express themselves in public and just have fun. The flapper was a kind of girl in the city who expressed herself and embraced the new fashions and urban attitudes of the day.
They became more assertive as well. Smoking and drinking, which was before seen acceptable only for men, became a common activity for women too. Sex was open for conversation with women. The division between genders was slimming. If women had done this years ago, their reputations would be ruined.
Before World War I, men pursued women who they planned to marry. As the years went by, casual dating began to become a norm. Marriage was no longer essential, and women were able to reach for higher goals.
A double standard, which was a set of principles granting sexual freedom to men and refusing to for women, required women to have stricter standards of behavior over men.
The change in times created confusion for the women on how to act. They were conflicted and torn between old versus new standards.
In the work setting, women continued to seek paid employment. Women's professions became more prominent, such as teachers, nurses, and librarians. Clerical workers were in demand as well, such as typists, filing clerks, secretaries, stenographers, and office machine operators.
Women broke old stereotypes by doing work once reserved for men, such as flying, driving taxis, and drilling oil wells.
Wherever they worked, women earned less than men. Men argued that women's jobs were temporary and their real jobs were at home.
However, the 19th Amendment disproved this. When women were granted the right to vote, their role in society changed. They went from being lower-class citizens to equals of men.
The birth rate was slipping over the past years, but it quickly dropped in the 1920s. This was because of the rise of birth control. The same woman who opened the first birth control clinic in 1916, Margaret Sanger, founded the American Birth Control League in 1921.
Women began to have their own freedom in the 1920s, and they could make decisions for themselves, and could even decide birth control for themselves.
So, over the 1920s, the role of women changed drastically. Their style, their mind, and their behavior is what paved the way for modern women today.
Women were thrown into jobs held by men when the men left. They prevailed in those jobs, and it led to their independent persona in the building of their expressionism.
Just one more minute, that's why we moved it. One more hug or two.
Stated in the text, education and entertainment reflected the conflict between traditional attitudes and modern ways of thinking.
The role of women had changed.